I want the bits from betting weekly because we win. That is our motto. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't win. Don't give us the bird, don't give us your stink eye. We try our best and we're successful. Come watch our show. Red River sponsors. It's time to start. Enjoy the show. Yeah, give me your picks. Give me your insights. I want the bits from Betting Weekly because we win. That is our motto. Sometimes we win. Sometimes we don't win.
Well, welcome in everyone to Betting Weekly Live. It's Monday, the 17th of March with Steve Wyss. I'm delighted that our US Handicapper Doug Kezirian is on the show. I hope life has been treating you well, Doug.
Oh, good to be with you, Steve. Yeah, it's an exciting time of year here in the States. March Madness. The brackets have been released. And then obviously so much else going on as well with the daily NBA. You got golf and a playoff, all the fun stuff. But yeah, really the talk of the town, so to speak, is March Madness and those bracket pools. And we also, many people cram, so to speak, to learn about these teams so they could pick their perfect bracket.
Yeah, I was just talking off air. This is, a huge week coming up. And, for you personally, a big 3 or 4 weeks really in general. For you, is this, if you go well in this period, how important is that for you in the context of the whole year?
Well, as in sports betting, we learn that the excitement of a game, such as the Super Bowl, or the excitement of March Madness, doesn't always necessarily equate to the betting opportunities. So in terms of like high magnitude of interest, doesn't mean there's a high magnitude of winning. So you pick your spots, right? You may love a first half over under in an NBA game more than you like any NCAA tournament game. And we know to kind of pick our spots more carefully, only bet the games that we think will return value. And it could come in any form. So if there's a tournament game I love, great. It's part of the fun. But as a sports fan, this is the time of year where it's great. And you really get sort of immersed in all the March Madness and the brackets.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome everyone into the chat. Put down your best bets of the day, of the week. Your futures here for March Madness. I just thought what we would do for those watching who are not quite as sure about the format of this whole event, March Madness, Doug, just sort of briefly go through the basics of it, the format, how we get the eventual winner.
Yeah, so it's just a giant bracket, right? There's no pool play. There's no anything along those lines. It's single elimination. And it used to be a field of 64. So as we know, the multiples of 4, but then they added 4 sort of play-in games, it's called. So that'll happen on Wednesday and Thursday, 2 games each day. And then the field of 64 will be set. And first round is Thursday, Friday. Second round is Saturday, Sunday. And then the next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, each of those rounds. And then, we've heard American terminology, Final Four, stuff like that, Elite 8, Sweet 16. That's just the bracket being whittled down to each round. And sometimes it's not the best team that wins the entire tournament. Usually it is, but not always. And as you would imagine, when there's a bracket, we see upsets because it's single elimination. And then beyond that, we also see a region or a quad of the bracket unfold more favorably, meaning upsets. So a team might have a clear path that opens up for, a certain team to make a run. And that's where we see sort of the country and the fan base get enamored with some underdogs who sort of everything opens up for them. And that's, part of the fun of this is certain teams emerge as fan favorites, whether it's because they have an upset off a buzzer beater or something like that. It's really a remarkable event because you have neutral courts. So these are all in certain sites that are predetermined. And you have crowds that are there, especially in the first couple rounds, that are there to watch maybe another school. And they get enamored. So certain players become overnight sensations, certain teams become overnight sensations and make a run, and everyone feels a part of it. It's very inclusive for all fan base because it's an extremely fair tournament. Every team in America, over 300 college basketball teams, have a chance to win the title because you get an automatic bid by winning your conference tournament. So every team can win their conference tournament and and get into the tournament, and then they go play single elimination neutral court, and it's wonderful. So we all get enamored with it all. Of course, the weather's changing as well, and it's an exciting time of year.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like quite a lot of fairy tales can sort of be made here in this March Madness. But yeah, just looking through the comments here, welcoming Villa fan, Ming Chung, Byron as well, Duncan Evans, up the Andreeva. That was Rory Jawan, his tennis selection. It won over the weekend on the futures at 11-1. Paul Laguna, great to see you. He's got UNC plus 8.5. That's another lock. Lipscomb plus 14.5. High Point plus 10.5 on a lean. Byron would like to personally thank Arsenal, Inter, and PSG for a great Sunday. And of course, the MLB starts, doesn't it? Very, very this week, I do believe, over in Japan. I think someone said it seems to start earlier and earlier. That does that event. Holo Aye, welcome in. It's a new name I've never seen in this chat before. Welcome in, and I'm not sure. Buenos dias, amigos. Good to see you. Mate SK as well. Toonami, Adam Thompson. There's going to be a lot of happy Newcastle fans in the chat today. Won their first major trophy in 70 years by winning the EFL Cup final yesterday. Congratulations to all you Newcastle fans in the chat. I know we do have quite a lot of them. Ranjiv Singh, Gandhi Hook. We've got 4 NBA matches we're going to discuss later with Doug. And Ranjiv has been putting his NBA plays in the chat recently, and 4-2 record so far. But you mentioned there, Doug, the first 4 games, as they're called, the playing games. I thought we'd get your thoughts on all 4 of them. You've got a couple of bets in 2 of these games. We will start with the St. Francis game against Alabama. Now, you don't have a pick in this one, but just the thing that strikes me with all these handicaps is they're so small. I mean, there's a team there, minus 4 points, minus 2.5. A lot of these matches are often double-digit point handicaps, aren't they? So all of these are quite close. St. Francis, Alabama, if you had to have any sort of lean in this game, which direction would you go?
So these are, you see the numbers next to each school. Those are the seeds for each quadrant. So there's 4 quadrants of 16 teams, and that's how you get to 64, right? So these are the plans. So there's a couple 16 seeds to determine who's going to be the 16 seed in that region. And so these are the 2 of the worst teams in the tournament, right? The bottom of a region. And that's okay. It's nothing against them, but I'm just trying to. And I mentioned a second ago that there's over 300 schools in college basketball in Division I. So we're talking about teams that won their conference tournament and are facing off against each other. So they are evenly matched. But whoever wins is going to be a huge underdog to the 1 seed in that region, facing a powerhouse. So these are not 2 schools that I paid a lot of attention to. And you mentioned, Steve, that the tight spread. It opened. There hasn't been much line movement on the games involving the 16 seeds. And as much as we want to wager on these games and things like that, it's really hard to project because there's websites out there and ratings, and they have this pretty tight. Certain in terms of the line. So this is no play for me. If I watch it and I start to see something jump off the screen that I feel like a certain team is bigger and has an advantage in the paint or faster, I'll dive deeper a little bit. But as much as we are all itching to bet on these games, cooler heads do prevail. There is a smarter approach, and that's to not necessarily get involved.
Yeah, this is wise, I've got to say. There is a massive temptation to get involved straight away, when often the clever move is to have a watching brief, see what's going on, especially if it's a game that you don't have, you've got doubts about both, really. But a matchup here which you do intend to get involved in, UNC San Diego State. We've got a few comments here about UNC. The spread is -4 on North Carolina. You think the favorite here could be worth backing?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy. North Carolina, based on the interviews with the committee members said it was the absolute last team to get into the tournament with an at-large bid. So they were on the cut line, they were on the fringe, on the bubble, as we like to say, and they did get in. Now, there's some controversy. I was on the side where I didn't think they belonged. It doesn't really matter. They're in the tournament, and it's all about the matchup. And this line has ticked up a little bit, and I'm not. So I went to games the other night in the Mountain West tournament. I've watched a lot of Mountain West and other conferences, of course. I think San Diego State is a shell of the program that went to the national championship game not too long ago. I do not think the San Diego State team is a typical San Diego State team. The Aztecs have been a solid mid-market program, and just this team just lacks the horses and doesn't have the right scoring offensively, and their defense isn't the same. Now, their coach, very well coached, and he can make some adjustments and against UNC, but Carolina is not that good. The ACC is, in terms of the major conferences, the power conference is the worst of them all. Top heavy, and we'll talk about some of those teams throughout the tournament that are pretty good, could make a run. But I do think it's a favorable matchup for Carolina. So I would lay the 4 with the Tar Heels. I just don't think San Diego State has the upside that UNC has. I think Carolina can handle this game.
Yeah, Paul Laguna says UNC -4 is a lock. And he thinks may get into the Sweet 16 here at 7-1. I had to look back, actually, the record of these any of these first 4 teams actually going deep in tournaments. It can happen, but as you said, there's some fairly poor teams getting involved here. Byron Murrell says San Diego State should not be in, period. So the -4 here on UNC is Doug's selection. There's 76% of the tickets is on UNC, 56% of the money is on San Diego State. Still a fair bit of time there before these games kick off, of course. So that could change. Another match you're very interested in getting involved in here is Xavier against Texas. Xavier -2.5 on the spread, -152 on the money line. That in itself might have appeal for those who just like to bet straight up, but the -2.5 is what the line that you would go with here, Doug.
Right. So this is another 16 seed matchup. The others are 11 seeds. So these are, again, teams that are among the handful of worst teams in the entire tournament, and not teams that I've seen play. Now, I've watched a lot of hoops and dug deep and things like that, and sometimes I'll have an advantage, but this is much like the first game. Like, I don't see one. Maybe in game something will happen, but I think you have to resist the temptation of the excitement of wagering on these games and parlays and stuff. We've seen a 16 seed win over a 1 seed before, but it's usually they get sort of handled. And so this is a battle or a matchup of 2 teams that are among the worst in the field, and the worst meaning like the bottom 5 or so, 5-8 or so. So I would be very careful here. And we talked about the magic of March Madness and the magic of the tournament and the excitement of the neutral sites and the elevated media attention that some of these teams get, right? They're going to be getting interviewed today, tomorrow by national media. The practices are going to be in these venues. That has an impact. We just don't know if it's a positive or negative. So you just don't know how. Very different than them playing a couple times during the week of the regular season against opponents that they know and gyms that are not as crowded. And it's a big stage, right? The media attention and everything, which is, thrilling and exciting for these players, but it also produces a variable that it's why it's called March Madness. It's not predictable March. So with the madness comes uncertainty and chaos. And I think it's fun to lean into it and have some crazy, maybe parlay tickets and stuff like that. But for the most part, I try to avoid situations where I really don't have a firm opinion. As we mentioned a second ago, I do have an opinion on the other game. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with waiting 40 minutes or an hour for the other game to start and not forcing a play here.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be very careful. And it sounds like, perhaps, when betting on the poorer teams, we don't know how some of these guys are going to react in the spotlight. It could be
right,
all
like
sorts
the Carolina.
Yeah.
We just talked about UNC. They've been on ESPN all year. They have a major program. huge tradition. The players will have had. I mean, they just played Duke a week ago. They've been in the ACC, so there's just they're going to take certain things in stride. But I probably should dig deeper. These 16 seeds are the favorites, the rightful favorites. How many upsets have we seen in these 2.5-point spreads and things like that? We've seen some lopsided games for sure. So sometimes there is betting value. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying, but I just personally don't have an angle. But there has been in the past certainly some one-sided outcomes where, I've talked to other pro bettors out here who say, "Oh no, I love their backcourt with the speed. This should be a one-sided game." Things like that.
This is a really close betting heat so far with Sportsbook. 52% of the money on Xavier, 54% of the tickets on Texas. So genuine pick 'em with the bettors. Just going back to the card here, the other game, St. Mary's there against American -2.5 plus 2.5 spread. American -143 on the money line. It looks like a difficult game, Doug. I mean, if you had to pick 4 winners from this slate here, who would you choose?
So I misspoke a second ago. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the St. Mary's and American game. So in terms of Xavier, Texas, which is the 11 seed, so these are bigger programs from bigger conferences. I do like Xavier. But it's tough. So this is really interesting. So Texas comes from the SEC, and it has the SEC, which is by far the most competitive conference in college basketball. They have 14 teams in this tournament, and that is a record. But so you have Texas, which comes from the SEC, that had an under 500 record in conference play, but the committee recognized that the SEC is very difficult. And so to rack up losses against elite competition is not necessarily a bad thing, depending on your metrics. So I do not believe in Texas's coach. I think Xavier's far superior coached, and I think Xavier has the right sort of formula that it could make a run here. But I will say I'm getting pause on Texas just internally, just because I know the Longhorns are so battle tested from playing in the big conference. And we saw them, be competitive in this SEC tournament over this past weekend. So I just wonder if some of that, like, I didn't like Texas this year, but they did win some things. And we see, some comments here saying Xavier coaching mismatch, should win by double digits. I agree. But what's given me pause and a little concern is that Texas is battle tested. They've literally played the best competition in the country on a consistent basis the last few months. And there's a little bit of an unknown with that, just because it's the first time ever we've seen a conference with 14 teams. And there's definitely a drop off between some other conferences. So I like Xavier, but I'm just a little gun shy because of that one component. But yes, in theory, I think Xavier's the better team, better coached, and should advance here.
Yeah, quite a few comments here. Mate SK says, why do people bet on Texas here? Xavier should win with double digits, overwhelming coaching mismatch. So, this immediately, this could look quite a very low handicap line come the end of the game. But you're right, it sounds like they're quite a, Texas maybe can deliver in the big games sometimes and surprise people. So I get where you're coming from there, Doug. It was a close betting heat, like I said there. 52% of the money on Xavier, 54% of the tickets on Texas. So let's just see how these first 4 games go. It's opening into the tournament, things get really serious after that. In terms of the actual futures market, we're not going to go through the whole card here today. But I can tell you now that it's the same as before. We discussed this before. Duke and Auburn, they're the 2 mostly backed teams here. 80% of the futures money handle is on Duke and 13% is on Auburn. Florida with 12%. There's the big 3 teams that have been backed in the outright futures market. We are going to look at a different futures market today, though, with Doug, and that is in the Midwest region here, where Houston are the plus 120 favorites. Now, Doug, you've got a couple of things to say here. You've got a pick at 18-1, and Also, we are going to talk here again about potentially a big price, depending if they can actually deliver on that big stage, like we said there. But talk us through this market here, Doug. Houston plus 120. Are they there to be opposed?
Okay, so this is the softest region in my, in all the regions. I think the weakest of the 4-1 seeds is Houston, and then I think there's certain teams that I think are really soft in terms of their seed. Like I think Purdue has basically no shot to win this region. I think they are not a good 4 seed. They're hanging on by a thread. They want to be eliminated early as far as I'm looking at their play. I just think they lack depth. So if Purdue's the 4 seed, I think that's a little shaky. Kentucky, I don't think they are. I mean, they're banged up with Lamont Butler. They're one of their guards. And I just don't think they have the horses like maybe some other 3 seeds. Now, that's why what the odds reflect, right? You have an 8 seed with shorter odds than their 4 seed, and some of this region is misseeded. So Houston, the reason I think they're the weakest of the 4-1 seeds is because they have a limited offense. Now their defense is excellent, but sometimes you catch an officiating crew or a referee who doesn't let you play as physical as you're used to playing, and therefore that sort of takes a little bit of the bite out of your defense. They have an excellent defense, but sometimes your defense is that good in certain matchups when, again, there's a familiarity in conference play. Okay, there are you face the same coaches, so your own coach can scout them. The offenses, you just sort of know a lot of the players and the coaches. You get out of conference. Sometimes a different situation. Obviously, Houston's got a good defense, but among all the regions, I think this is sort of the wild card region, if you will. So I do like Clemson, and I've talked about them in the futures market, but 18-1 to win the Midwest region, I think is a decent play. They come from the ACC, which is a weak power conference, but that's top to bottom. Top of the conference is quite good. Clemson beat Duke this year on its home court, but still a win over the Blue Devils. And I like their guard play and their bigs. They're just a team that has some experience, and I think they can make a run. And the bracket unfolds favorably. Even if they do face Purdue, I think Clemson's going to be favored. And then they would, in theory, catch Houston, but there's a chance Gonzaga beats them or Georgia. And so I just think the bracket, all things considered, could unfold favorably for Clemson at 18-1. That's a nice price, all things considered, in my eyes. I thought about Texas 100-1. Again, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, we don't really know how the battle-tested SEC is going to unfold. Texas 100-1 is pretty crazy, all things considered. I mean, you have Tennessee and Kentucky in their region, and they had super tight games with Tennessee. I believe there was a 4-point game earlier in the season, and then just recently they played a tight game, I think, in the conference tournament. Or either way, Texas has hung around in some of these games against stiffer competition. So 100-1. And again, I talked about it earlier. Sometimes the bracket can unfold extremely favorably, such as upsets occur. So as you play out the bracket in front of you, sometimes you don't even face some of the good teams because they all get beaten before you would have to face them. So at 100-1, I was just worth a flyer. That I was thinking about it again. We've never seen 14 teams from a conference before in the tournament. Very top, very, very stacked, battle tested. I'm curious as a sports fan just how this all plays out, right? Do these teams in the quote unquote coin flip games make a run, or are we going to see a bunch of SEC teams in the Sweet 16? Are we going to see like 11 or 9 teams or 10 teams in the Sweet 16? I'm just curious how it all plays out.
Yeah, they've actually been backed in as we're live on air, 15-1 now, Clemson. So, yeah, they do look like they might become a popular pick. Producer Troy there has got a ticket on them at 30-1. That's looking quite juicy, Troy. Byron Murrell says Purdue, Kentucky, and Illinois, it's all soft seeds. Yeah, I'm just looking at these regions, and there's teams here minus money to win their regions to basically to get into the Final Four, right? And would you? There's obviously going to be some mismatches, but would you be taking anything sort of minus money to win their regions, Doug. It just seems like in these one-off games, anything can happen. It would be dangerous.
I agree. And to be fair, these are what's called one-way betting markets, right? So you're only getting one side to bet on. And as opposed to a point spread, you can bet both sides, right? Two-way market. It's a one-way betting market. So the hold percentage is there for the house, and for minus money for a team to win 4 games. That's what these 1 seeds or these 2 seeds have to do that are minus money. And again, Duke is one of those. Now, Duke's star player got hurt last week and rolled his ankle. Now, all signs point to his being back, but how close to 100%? They should have a pretty easy run. They still won the ACC tournament without him, but a very tight game on Friday night with Carolina. I would not be laying minus money because I don't think Auburn's playing its best. I worry that the Tigers have peaked too early. The Blue Devils, we'll see. They certainly have the capabilities, and they're a young team. But I always say this, and especially in college football, when the bowl games are such a delay, by the end of the season, these guys aren't really freshmen. I mean, they have so many games under their belt, so much game experience, the practices. I'm not concerned about Duke's youth at all. Now, a good team just might beat them on a given day, which that certainly can happen. But I wouldn't chalk it up to like, oh, they're too inexperienced. I think they've had so many games. They start freshmen, all that. I'd be, Flagg's injury, Cooper Flagg's injury does concern me a little bit. And, any team can go cold shooting in these single elimination games. So to your point, Steve, I don't love the minus money in some of these regions. They are not as dominant as we've seen from other years, kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there, Doug. But yeah, watch out for Clemson in this futures market. 15-1 now.
And Clemson has a tough first game, as one of our members of the chat mentioned.
Yes, they're saying that. Yeah,
McNeese State, coached by a solid coach who built a reputation going to bigger programs. But all these games are tough, and of course, you're taking 18-1. You're not getting 3-1, so they're going to have tough games every week.
They are.
But the bracket could unfold, and I like the makeup of this team.
Doug, can we take Maryland at 10-1 if they beat Florida? What do you think about that?
So Maryland in their region to go 10-1. I like Maryland. They have a very good starting 5. We know about it. Very top heavy, lack depth, but that may not, be an issue. I think Maryland's the best. Sorry, Florida's the best team in the country. I really do. They might have a really tough game against Danny Hurley in the second round if UConn advances. I would be very careful betting against the Gators. So the Gators just won the conference tournament of the best conference tournament. So they come from the SEC. So they just have emerged and they've looked the part. And I haven't seen any drop off with the Gators at all prior to, like I said, Auburn may have peaked too early. I really like where this Florida team is at. I really do. And I am going to not try to get cute and bet into them. We'll see what the point spread is, but Maryland has the upside for sure. I just think Florida's a really, really tough opponent.
Regidan Codes, welcome in. Good to see you. Have you cracked the code for March Madness, Regidan? That's the question.
Steve, I don't think you introduced your cat here. What about your furry friend?
Well, yes, this is Kit Kat. It might be the first time you've come across him. He has been on quite a few live shows recently. He seems to enjoy the spotlight. And is he doing a bracket, Paul? He's just biding his time. He's learning his trade with March Madness. We'll have to get him a team. He has to be a team that he can support.
Well, there's some mascots out there that are similar that were in the feline family. So maybe that'll be one of them.
Yeah.
Sure, we got tigers in the tournament, things like that. So we'll see.
That's right, on Kit Kat Street. Definitely, for sure. Okay, we've got some NBA games that we're going to talk about today. We've got 3 on the list there. There's actually one more as well, but that Doug's going to take a look at. Miami Heat at the New York Knicks here. A 7.5 spread. Doug here. Any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this game's on national television on ESPN. I actually have some strong thoughts. So typical good handicapping spot. We talk about matchups, but there's also situational handicaps, where in the schedule and things like that. So the Knicks are returning home after a 4-game or 5-game road trip, and did a data search, and teams in the NBA going back 2 decades or 3 decades, that are off a road trip of at least 4 games, their first home game, they sort of are flat. Think about it. They've been traveled a bunch. They're coming home, and they are under 500, like 48% cover percentage. So I do like the dog just at first glance. And on top of that, the Knicks had a very emotional, high-profile ABC game on Saturday night, and there was some tension. I won't go into it, but some player on the Warriors was running his mouth falsely, accusing one of the star players of the Knicks, Karl Anthony Towns, of whatever. He ended up proving wrong, but the team sort of rallied around their teammate. So I think the Knicks had an emotional game, is what I'm saying, on Saturday. So returning home after a long road trip, emotional game. And they're sort of a sluggish, sleepy, situational spot, I think, for the Knicks in this game. But the problem is the Miami Heat have been terrible of late. They've lost 7 straight, but really the second halves are where they're terrible. They're among the worst in the entire NBA, especially fourth quarter. They're among the worst point differentials. For whatever reason, they've just been a team that's faded hard. So I'm going to back Miami in the first half. I think that sluggish sort of handicap and apathy that I'm anticipating from New York will be more pronounced in the first half. And I think the Heat, who actually have ranked 10th in point differential in the first half, I mean, the teams are around them, teams that are 9th and 11th, are playoff bound. So that's a really strong, ranking in first half point differential. So they've started a lot of games. So I think, +4 in the first half is a really solid bet in my eyes, based on, the variables and the situation that I outlined.
Yeah, I'm trying to just look here on Bet Rivers if you can actually bet halftime, full time in the NBA. I'm sure you would be able to somewhere. Surely that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah. I don't think maybe the line's quite up yet, but that would maybe an interesting one to look at. I can tell you now, 58% of the tickets in this match are on the Heat. So thinking perhaps along your line of thoughts there. That's the match line there, not the first half line, of course, which is an interesting one. I think you make a very, very good point about the potential emotional come downs as well. And also, after the traveling factor coming back home, it can be for sure something to consider. Philadelphia 76ers at the Houston Rockets here. We've got a massive spread, 16.5. The 76ers nearly 10-1 to win this game. I mean, that would be quite an upset here, wouldn't it, Doug? Did you give them any chance at all?
No, not a whole lot, although they just won yesterday. They had a nice little upset in Dallas, but they're playing Dallas, which is depleted, shorthanded like no other. They've been banged up with injuries, so much different ass than facing a Houston team that's playoff bound. They've won 6 straight, so I think this could be a little bit of a flat spot for Houston, just not being up for their opponent. Now, the Rockets do have a very intense coach who will demand, he won't take things lightly. But as we all know, one of the hardest parts of coaching is making your players sort of see what you see and have the aggression that coaches typically are much more intense and much more thorough and don't have flat spots as opposed to some of the players. I think this could be a weird game for Houston, where Philly just kind of hangs around and sneaks inside the number. I think it's going to be right around 10. I'm hoping it could be 20, but I don't think this is a game where Philly's going to have the lead in the second half or anything like that. Philly will play hard, but the problem is they're incentivized to lose because of the draft coming up. So the players that are playing aren't, they're not
the way it goes,
the
isn't
strongest
it?
team. Yeah, the roster, a lot of guys are out with injuries, let's call it. So, but these are players that are not tanking. They are playing hard and they are trying to win, and they're trying to get long-term contracts in the NBA and all that stuff. So I lead. It's a lot of points in my eyes. So I'll grab the points in a game that, there's still, Philly still gets 5 guys to suit up, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah. Detroit Pistons here at the Pelicans, favorite on the road, -7. I mean, the Pelicans have a poor overall record, -245 on the money line here. Are they justifying road favorite as a -7, do you think, Doug?
Yeah, so one thing a pro bettor told me a while ago, the best thing to bet on is a focused favorite. You get a team that is favored by the metrics, and then they're focused. And that is the best sort of angle. So right now, this Pistons team has lost back-to-back games, coming off a hard-fought loss to one of the best teams in the league, and their best player was ejected for arguing with the officials. So I just think you're going to get a really strong effort out of the Pistons. And the Pelicans, you mentioned their record. Some of that was the beginning of the season when they had their star players hurt. Now those guys are back. But I think Detroit's going to come in and they can carve up this weak Pelicans defense. So I really like Detroit minus the 7. I also like a prop bet in this game. It's not available everywhere and things like that. It's tough to kind of find because there's one Detroit center, Jalen Duren. He's gone under his prop in, I believe it's like 10 of the last 11 games. So this particular prop. So it's assists, total assists, if you can find it. And I see it on Bet Rivers. Jalen Duren under 2.5 assists. It's only minus 103. And he's a center. He gets 0, 1, 2, and sometimes 3. So it's a little bit of a sweat, especially if he gets an assist early, right? You don't have a lot of wiggle room. So it's nice. Like the other night I had it on Saturday. He had 0 in the first half, which is exactly what you want. Then he gets 1 early and you're like, okay, we don't have a lot to work with. And then in the fourth quarter, he had 2. So it's like you're sitting there on 2 and you can't have another assist. But just he plays right around the rim. They don't run the offense through him. It's really rare for him to get an assist. I don't know how he averages 2.5 on the season. His backup, Isaiah Stewart's been playing a lot too. So I'm going to bet it every game. I just think the season average is not applicable to what he's been averaging lately. So it's a random prop, but it's fun, 2.5. So I like the under 2.5 assists for Jalen Duren on Detroit.
Yeah, there we go. Doug with one of his signature under bets on Betting Weekly Live. I think only Nigel Seeley has more unders than Doug sometimes. So would that be the best bet of the day for you in the NBA? You think in this?
I think the Pistons are. I think the Pistons minus the 7. I really think they blow them out.
I've not got it on the graphic, but Raptors at the Suns was the final game you wanted to talk about here. Doug, we've got 97% of the money and 89% of the tickets are on the Suns in this game. Very popular betting. Would you want to get with them or against them?
That's fascinating because the reason I wanted to bring it up is because the Suns are coming off an embarrassing performance yesterday. They have the second worst. Well, actually, they have the worst cover percent. Sorry, second worst cover percentage in the entire NBA. Ooh. They're only 26, 41, and 1 ATS. So they've just been an embarrassment against. But really, really, what Phoenix is, awful win. They're horrendous. I think they only have 5 covers all season off a win, and that is. They just lack the edge. They don't like playing with each other. It's a very toxic team. And I thought that'd be a fun game to just handicap because, everyone saw them on national television just lay an egg. They were down double digits right away. And they have the star power on paper, but they've just been so terrible. But I will say, and I'm shocked that the percentages are there, but off a win, they're actually 19 and 17 against the spread this year. So sorry, off a loss, excuse me. So they just lost yesterday and they're 19 and 7 against the spread in that situation. So as tempting it is to react to what you last saw and bet accordingly. I do think these guys are in the NBA for a reason. They just got embarrassed by the Lakers on Sunday. I could see them blowing out Toronto, who just had a hard-fought game on Sunday themselves in Portland. So it's back-to-back road trip travel. Now the Raptors do play hard. And they don't mess around, and it's a lot of points. But I would just say I'm not betting Phoenix, but I am being careful. I don't want to bet them, even though what I just last witness was horrible. But they are 7-23-1 off a win. So Phoenix, you want to bet on them off a win. That's when their lack of professionalism really shines. But off a loss, they're much more likely to produce up to their skill set.
I think that's a very good point about these teams that come off. When they've been embarrassed, you just don't know which way the next game is going to go. It can go in either direction. Thanks very much. Everyone's been putting in their player props in the chat as well. Mate SK, Ranjiv, Grimes over 20.5 seems a popular play in that. Is that the Pistons game we talked about there?
It's the Sixers. So, the Sixers who are playing the Rockets.
Sorry. Yeah. So that's a popular one there. But yeah, thank you everyone who did join in chat today. Best of luck whatever you are taking. Go well with March Madness. as Mate SK says there. Doug, we've got you on on Betting Weekly Live 2 more times before the end of March, and things will be a lot more progressed the next time you're on the show. It's going to be very, very exciting. So I'm wishing you the very best of luck as well with everything over the next week or two. And we look forward to you next time on Betting Weekly Live.
Oh, thanks so much. And, obviously it's an exciting time of year. So best of luck to everyone with their brackets. Enjoy the madness in March. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the rest of this week on Betting Weekly Live, I can say we've got our WTA handicapper, Rory Giwani. He's going to be with Dan Roebuck tomorrow. Sean Calvert is going to be with me on Wednesday with the big tournament in Miami there with the tennis. And then the return of Rory Barlow on Betting Weekly Live on Thursday, talking international soccer with myself. So lots to look forward to on Betting Weekly Live. Shakespeare is back here. An MLB specialist, and he makes a very good point. Welcome back into the chat, Shakespeare. I hope you've been wintering well, and best of luck with your MLB plays this season. He's put his plays there in the chat, so we look forward to more Shakespeare plays before the end of the MLB season. But take care, everyone. Stay safe. Remember to gamble responsibly. I'll see you next time on Betting Weekly Live.